The Joe Rogan Experience.
Now, going back to what you said about SEALs writing books, interestingly enough, in the first book, there's an interrogation scene, an interview, meaning not a torture scene, but sitting down with NCIS, so the Naval Criminal Investigation Service. And so some bad things. My career wasn't all wonderful. Like the downrange stuff, very lucky, very fortunate to be in a couple right places at the right times to do some interesting things. But when we got back, a good buddy of mine, Mark Owen, he writes a book called No Easy Day. And that's the one about the Bin Laden raid. And that one, that was like a tipping point, because in our community at the time, there'd been Act of Valor, that movie with SEALs, active duty SEALs playing characters in an actual movie. There were other books out there. So there was already discussion happening like, hey, are we too much in the limelight here? We're supposed to be these quiet professionals. But, going back in time, I read all these Vietnam books growing up and every autobiography I could about people in the military. Grant has his memoirs or whatever. So there's a precedent, not just in this country, but worldwide, of people getting out, talking about their experiences. And that's part of a first-person account that historians will use later.
Is it frowned upon at all?
So it was starting to get even more and more frowned upon right up to that point, and that was the tipping point. So when that book came out, that's when everyone said, or not everyone, senior level leaders were like, okay, I'll stop. And they really, because of that book, they went and all the investigations that happened, they went in and essentially anyone that had a connection with him, they pulled in and investigated as a way to put pressure on him to get what they wanted. So I was one of those guys. I've known him since 99 or something like that. So we've been dear friends since that time. And so we have emails going back all these years. So I got pulled into this interrogation room, and they pulled out single personal emails, single sentences, totally out of context, to try to get me for something that would put pressure on him. And they did that not just with me, but with almost anyone that had some sort of a connection with him. They investigated, because he's already out of the military at this point.
So things that you said totally out of context, like joking around about something, or just statements about things?
Just statements like, what did you mean by this? And I used that in the first novel, because I'm sitting there in this interrogation. You got these guys across from you, and essentially NCIS from my perspective, are people that they couldn't make it in the FBI or the CIA, and they weren't tough enough to be street cops. So now they're busting people on piss tests in the military and that sort of thing. Actually, my first experience with them was after September 11th, and I think we're all on the same team, and we're doing these shipboardings in the Northern Arabian Gulf to enforce the UN embargo for oil tankers that are leaving Iraq and then going to Iran. And so our job was to take those ships down before they got to Iranian waters, and then the UN would take over after that. But it was a really interesting time, because it's like a cop pulling over someone and you're walking up and you don't really know what's going on. And so they would come out of Iraq. They had all these metal over all the windows. It cut off all the ladders on the ship, so you'd have to use a caving ladder to hook and climb up, and then you'd have to breach and get inside these things and get them back into the Gulf before they hit Iranian waters. Otherwise, you had to get off. So it was kind of a crazy deal. But during and we're doing a couple nights on, couple nights off, that sort of thing with another platoon, and then NCIS shows up. And they pull us all into these different rooms, and they said, hey, so an M60, some sort of a like machine gun type thing, has gone missing on one of these ships that you guys were on. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. Okay. Well, how can I help you? And so they started talking, and how would you get one off a ship if you wanted to steal a machine gun from a ship? How would you get it off? And me, I'm just kind of creative. I'm like, we're all on the same team here. I'm like, oh, this is what I would do. I'd take it off piece by piece, and whatever I said. So I gave them and then as I was nearing the end, I'm seeing it in their face and seeing the notes they're taking. I'm like, wait a second. Are they like trying to get me to, like, I didn't take an M60 off a ship piece by piece. We were only on there for
the problem is you're an author.
And I'm trying to think of this all through. Yeah. So I'm like,
you're being creative.
Yeah. So even back then I had a bad experience with them. But
so what are they saying to you?
Anyway,
Did you do this? They just start accusing you?
In with the Mark Owen. Oh, in there? No, they didn't accuse me, but I could tell that things shifted as I'm getting so creative and telling them how I do it, and I'd mix it in with this, and we'd get it off like that.
Get excited and smiling.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, just like I am now. And then these guys are just like, anyway. So I kind of figured it out near the end, and I'm like, oh wow, something's not feeling quite right here. Like, these guys are just after a win. That's what they're just trying to get somebody. That's their job, and if they can get a SEAL, even better. So after Mark Owen wrote the book No Easy Day, same thing. And you saw these guys across the table, and this is years later, so it wasn't like immediately. They went after some guys immediately, whatever, but they put all this together over a long time and followed
What was
all
their
these
ultimate goal?
strings. And
What do they want?
I think they wanted him to they wanted to build a case against him, a criminal case against him.
For what?
For not submitting his book to the Department of Defense for review. And
Is that so they can redact certain things that are classified?
Yeah, which is why I was hypersensitive to it, and even though mine are fiction, I submitted them. Which
And is that
total pain.
protocol? So when all those things in your book where it says redacted,
Yep.
is that why it's redacted? Really?
Yep.
So it's because of them.
Yep. So they made me
Wow.
hypersensitive to it. So no other author of fiction that has the security clearances that I had, no one else submits fiction. But I was so just tied to this because of my experience with the Mark Owen book and what they tried to do. I was like, I just want to make sure.
Right.
And what they've taken out, absolutely ridiculous. So the first book, I didn't appeal it because they took 45 days to do it, which I thought was pretty good because they say they'll take 30. And I thought it's pretty good. They took out 9 lines or something like that, which was fine. But the second one, a month goes by, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. And they get almost to the 7-month mark when they finally get back to me. So at this point, we had to push the publication date out of April to the summer. It's like a movie, trying to figure out like when you don't want 2 Avengers movies coming out at the same time from the same studio.
Right.
So these are thought well ahead of time. So it was not convenient to have to push it all the way to the end of July. So it was a pain. And every single thing in there that was blacked out, my attorneys found in publicly available government documents. So not just like on Wikipedia or from somebody else that wrote a book or whatever. No. Publicly available government websites, government documents that anyone on earth
So
can
they
download.
had done their due diligence to check if that stuff had actually been released already publicly.
My lawyers did.
Yeah,
when
but
it
the
came
people
back.
that the
Those guys,
yeah.
the people you submitted to at the
Yeah.
Department of Defense, they just have this black pen and they're just
Oh,
just
God.
taking things out. And then they see, oh, CIA, we'll send it off to the CIA, even though I don't work for the CIA, but they send it off. And then that starts the CIA clock looking at it. It's just, it's ridiculous.
And this is not something you had to do
It's by precedent, no.
because it's fiction.
Because it's fiction. By precedent. Now, like we talked about those laws earlier, 3 felonies a day.
Yeah.
The laws are written, if you look at them, very broadly so that the government can interpret them the way they want to. And that didn't always used to be the case. If you go back 50 years, the idea was you had to write a law that the average guy could understand when you looked at it one time, read it, it's evident what that law means. Not anymore. The language involved, how long they are, how tough they are to decipher, even for attorneys to decipher. So it's written in a way that they can come after anyone they want for anything, which is by design. And they used it to go after Mark Owen. They used it, even though that's nonfiction. Maybe should have. He went to an attorney that had experience in this space, which you would do. Who's the best attorney for this? Oh, the guy that did a book called Kill Bin Laden with someone from Delta Force. That guy has experience. I'll go to him. So he went to that lawyer who said, no, you don't need to submit this. So there's lawsuits and all sorts of stuff that are associated with that. But for me, what they did, this is years later, his second book, he sends it to me. So I'm getting ready to get out of the military. He sends me his second book and says, hey, what do you think of this? And so I read it and read it quick. And then I sent him like one note that said, hey, awesome. Maybe in the first part in the preface, maybe talk about your experience over the last couple of years with the first book and what the government did to you and how you reacted. Just people would probably be interested in that. So I wrote that. So now I'm in this interrogation room with these NCIS guys, and that's one of the things that they pull out and said, so why are you editing classified material that hasn't been approved? But like, I don't know. Guy's a good friend, sends me the thing, I look at it. So what they wanted was to just put pressure on him and said, hey, we're going to go after your buddy if you don't do this for us, which was probably to say.
So what did they want from him?
I think they wanted him to admit he was guilty, and they also wanted a statement of not submitting it to the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review, not going through. They want to make an example of him so that anybody else getting out would know that they had to do that. And I don't think it worked because there's plenty of books out there that nonfiction that have not been through that process.
Right.
But that's what they wanted from him. They wanted all the money from it, which was significant.
All the money.
Yep. And interestingly enough,
All the money.
all the money. And he was always going to give it all. That's the other part of this is so interesting is because I've known him for so long, he was always going to give it all away. And he had no reason to tell me that, a year before however long it was before. Like he wasn't setting this up as some criminal mastermind, but he was always going to give it away to a SEAL Foundation. And when the book came out, it all went into a bank account. But guess what came out of the bank account? Lawyer fees after that. So he still had all the money except for the lawyer fees. And then they still go after you for taxes that you're supposed to be. Anyway, it's the government. So so they wanted that money. Anything money going forward, like if they made a movie from it, all those proceeds, they just wanted to crush him and make an example of him so other people would submit or make people think about not even writing anything anyway.
How did it all end up?
So it's a lawsuit with the attorney that gave the bad advice. I'm not sure exactly where that is. And then all the money went back to the government that was in the account, and he's paying off the rest of it that went to attorney fees. So
he didn't make anything?
No.
Wow.
Not one penny.
All the money went to the government?
All the money went to the government.
And
plus taxes.
So double money. Yep. So all the money goes to the government because he lost? Is that the idea? Because
they finally put enough pressure on where the lawyers do their thing and they figure out a settlement of some sort.
And that was the settlement, all the money. Wow. And his second book, the same deal?
No, that one went through the process, but after I read it. So he sent it to me before he sent it in.
Okay.
But, there's nothing, I don't know. But you read it, and that's what one of the things they used to try to get him to do what they wanted. So, and that wasn't the only one. There's everybody that knew him got pulled into this thing. And but point being is that had that not happened, then that interrogation scene in my novel where James Reese sits down after what happens to his team, sits down with those guys across the table. And I changed it to Afghanistan, changed it from San Diego to Afghanistan. But that's how I felt about the guys sitting across the table from me. So it feels real because I wasn't just like, hey, have you ever been into an interrogation room? Or I'm arrested in a couple of cop shows where they have somebody in an interrogation room. I'll just kind of write what that looks like or feels like. No, that's what it feels like to be in there, having these eyes on you, having them tell you that there's no cameras on when you know that there are, and all that sort of thing. So I got to put all that together and make the book what it is. So without that happening, without them trying to go after me to put pressure on him and everyone associated with that, the first book would not be nearly as good. Like the combat stuff, yeah, it's different. But the other stuff, the conspiracy side of the house and the NCIS guys and that interrogation in particular and some of the bad guys that, once again, you can't kill people in real life, but you know what? You can in fiction. Right. And so it made it so much better than it would have been otherwise. So now looking back, and I thank him to this day, I'm like, hey, you know what? That first book, that resonated with Simon & Schuster for some reason. And a lot of it's what happened downrange and those feelings and emotions, but a lot of it is because of what happened with you, as I was getting out.
That's interesting.